What's up, y'all? Welcome to the Young Legends podcast, where we teach you the cheat codes to the game of life. I'm your host, Caption, aka Caption Red, and I hope you're doing wonderful wherever you are. I'm doing well myself. Today I'm going to talk to you about doing the impossible, but I also am going to give you an update on what's going on with me that ties into that idea. So here's what I've been up to. I have been very busy. For the past month plus, I've been working on ideas and projects in regards to the census and the 2020 election. So here's a little info that you may or may not know. The census comes every 10 years, and elections come every 4 years, except for midterm elections, but those don't count as much. Now, these important events don't happen very often, but they have a huge impact on the way things go for our country and the people in our communities. So why is the census important? Because the census affects federal funding for many things, including hospitals, roads, schools, parks, housing, unemployment insurance. And beyond that, businesses use it to decide whether or not to do business somewhere. It affects representation in Congress for the next 10 years. Now, just to put some dollars on that, this affects $1.5 trillion a year of federal funding, and over the span of 10 years, of course, that's $15 trillion. And what happens is when people don't fill out the census, which they should, and you have until October 31st to do so, every person that is not counted, it costs your community $2,000 in services per year. So one person over the span of 10 years is $20,000. Now think about this. A family of 5 not being counted, that would cost their community $10,000 a year. And over the span of 10 years, that's $100,000. Also, the 2020 election. What do elections determine? They determine who makes decisions locally in your community, all the way up to the federal level. From school board members all the way up to presidents. And the people who are elected have power for 2 to 6 years. But it's not just elected officials that we're deciding on. Elections also have referendums on taxes. That's when the people decide whether or not we want to pay more taxes. So things that cost more money because of the referendum on taxes. Also, when schools don't have funding, that also oftentimes has to do with referendums on taxes. Now, you can't complain about taxes or the lack of resources from taxes, or the president, or laws in general, if you don't vote. So if you can register to vote, please do so. And also, if you are registered, make sure that you go out and vote. I recommend voting early and not waiting until November 3rd. Now, I've been pouring a lot of energy into my projects. Will my ideas and my actions make an impact on people? I don't know. Because here's the deal. People don't care enough about either of these things, so the chances are low. But I'm doing them. Why? Well, that question leads me to a quote by Elon Musk, where he said, "When something is important enough, you do it, even if the odds are not in your favor." Now, Elon Musk is the founder of Tesla. He's a $90 billion man, and he has built companies from the ground up. When he sold PayPal to eBay, he made $180 million from that sale. And what he did with that money is he started SpaceX and Tesla. And he actually thought both SpaceX and Tesla would fail, and both of them almost did. So why would he start companies that he thought would fail? Because he realized that not dealing with climate change and not switching to alternative fuels would send our human history in the wrong direction. So he wanted to fight against both of those in order to save humanity. And let me tell you something, humanity is important, which is like the understatement of 2020. But anyhow, he did something that he thought wouldn't happen. Now, another man who did things that seemed impossible was Steve Jobs. What he did is he pushed his engineers to make computers faster and better. And when he pushed them, they said, "What you're asking us to do is impossible." And they pushed back on him, but eventually they ended up doing the things they thought were impossible. Now, don't be a tyrant like Steve Jobs, but understand that the MacBook, the iPhone, all the Apple products out there are what they are because of his pushing. And think about eating contest champions. Think about becoming an eating contest champion. Do you know how hard it is to put those hot dogs down? That's a lot of belly aches. That's a lot of crying. That's a lot of people laughing at your dreams. That's a lot of broken toilets. If you really think about it. Don't think about that. Never mind. Anyways, but those people became champions because they did what seemed impossible. And side note, that's actually a really dangerous job. Don't do it. It's really bad for your body. But anyways, on a more personal note, before I started doing podcasting, I wanted to do youth motivational speaking. But the problem was I was really bad at speaking. But I had this message in my heart. And so I bombed a lot of speeches in the beginning. Now, let me tell you something. There are very few things worse than failing at something that most people are deathly afraid of. But after every speech, I got a little less scared. And I got a little better. And over, I just started sucking less. Over and over, I gave speeches. I got a little better. I got a little better. I got a little better. And then eventually I got to the level where people were like, man, you're a good speaker. And then I started getting paid gigs and trying my hand at it. But I honestly prefer doing a podcast instead. And as I make this podcast, when I tell people I'm making a podcast to help teens, they say it's a stupid idea. They say young people don't listen. They think they know everything. They're unteachable, and on and on and on. But it's important enough for me to try to reach young people, and therefore I do it because I know that the information in this podcast can change your lives. All right, so ask yourself this question. What's important to you? Look at your values, look at what you value most, and that'll help inform your decision. What makes you angry? That's a great indicator of what you should be doing. What change do you want to see happen? For yourself, but also for the world at large. And when you figure out what's important to you, go out there, get in the way, get into good trouble, necessary trouble, as the late great John Lewis would say. Now, speaking of John Lewis, think about the civil rights movement for a second. Think about how impossible that seemed, to tear down the walls of segregation, where things had been the same way since they ended slavery for 100 years. Think about how inconceivable it would be back then to think they'd open up the lunch counters, that they'd desegregate theaters and buses and public schools. But people like John Lewis and the brave souls who stood up and practiced nonviolent protest made the impossible possible. They gave people their dignity. They gave them the right to vote. They stopped racial discrimination in housing. They helped people get job opportunities. Things that we take for granted today, like becoming a flight attendant, was off the table for African Americans during this time. Those who fought in the civil rights movement changed the world. Now, speaking of changing the world, think about Mahatma Gandhi. What did he do? He took the British Empire to task. One of the most powerful empires of all of history. He took them to task, and his actions helped get freedom for 350 million people in India, who are now, today, 1.4 billion people. Now, not only did he get freedom for his people, but he inspired the likes of Cesar Chavez, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., John Lewis, Fannie Lou Hamer, all these people who helped get freedom for and inspire the next generation, including President Barack Obama. Now, I don't care what your politics are. President Barack Obama has inspired a ton of kids and a ton of people in America and around the world to believe what's possible for themselves and also the world at large. So the long-term impact of Mahatma Gandhi's life is huge. And the long-term impact of your life can also be huge if you step up and you try to do the impossible. And even people that I've had on this podcast, including Brian Bushway, who lost his eyesight at the age of 14, but now he works to help blind people become self-sufficient so they don't need other people in their lives, so they can be independent, And not only does he change their lives, but also changes people's perceptions on what people who are disabled can do and also become, and even what's possible for everyone. Or Tim Petty, the Olympic cyclist, who saw so much doping in the cycling world and saw how wrong it was and said this needs to change. So what did he do? He helped create the U.S. Anti-Doping Agency, which helped get performance-enhancing drugs out of Olympic sports. Or what about Kirsten and Julian from Rich and Regular, who have a blog and who make YouTube videos to help regular people to go from living from check to check to becoming financially independent, which not only changes their lives, but also the generations that come after them. Now, all these people are doing things that are amazing, that may seem impossible, and have improved their lives and also generations that come after them. Well, maybe you don't care so much about helping people. Maybe you just want to live your life. So why would you do things that are important but have a high likelihood of failure? Because nobody likes to fail. That's why we don't do things, right? Because we're afraid of failure. Here's why. You don't want to live with regrets on what could have been. And when you try to do what's important, you never have to wonder if you could have gotten there. And let me tell you something. Living with regret, wondering what could have been, absolutely sucks. But beyond that, you're going to be able to look yourself in the mirror and have self-pride that you gave it all, that you lived. But beyond that, when you try to do things that have a high likelihood of failure, you learn from your failure. And it equips you for the next time. Because sometimes in life, you win, and sometimes you learn. Now, most business owners have failed multiple times before they succeeded, including Mark Cuban, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and the list goes on. So sometimes failure is a stepping stone to help you to do it right the next time. Beyond that, you get to do things that you only dreamed of. You get to go places and do things you never thought you could. Every time I'm up on stage, nowadays more performing. Actually, nowadays I'm not performing because of COVID. But when I do perform at events, I remember that at one point in my life, this was a pipe dream. Beyond that, when you do these things that are important, it not only affects you, it affects your entire family and everyone else that you're close with. I remember listening to this college professor speak, a man that graduated with multiple degrees, including his PhD. And when he was in high school, his high school counselor told him, people like you don't go to college. But he didn't listen to the naysayer, and he went on and got his degree and more degrees. And all of his sisters saw him graduate and get an education, and they followed suit. See, he was the first in his family to go to college, but definitely not the last. So your actions not only affect you, but they affect the people that you love most. I have a friend actually who grew up in poverty on the south side of Chicago. He went to 12 different schools from elementary to high school graduation, but he wanted to be successful. And so he did many things, which includes doing well in real estate. And he was able to hand a set of keys to his mother for a brand new house. And this woman had been a renter her entire life, never owned anything. But in doing the things that were important, with the odds stacked against him, he was able to make her dreams come true. Also, when you do the things that are important, that you have a low likelihood of success, you become the very best version of yourself. It makes you think creatively, it challenges you to level up, and you might take some losses, but guess what? Losses make you tough. And toughness is what's necessary to make people great. So let me ask you a question. What is your impossible task? Maybe it's graduating high school. I knew a young man who had an IQ of 75. And just to put that into context, an IQ of 100 is average. An IQ of 70 is when you're considered intellectually disabled. But he eventually graduated high school because he kept trying and because it was important enough to him. What is your impossible task? Maybe it's going off to college. Maybe you're obese and you need to lose weight to be healthy. And here's a side note, if you decide to start losing weight, make sure you do it in a healthy way. Maybe you have an addiction that you have to beat. Maybe you want to get good at sculpting or coding or developing your people skills. Maybe you're painfully shy. Maybe you want to do public speaking one day. But ask yourself the question, what is the thing that's important enough to you where the odds may not be in your favor, but it's something that you just have to try to make happen? Maybe it's a problem that affects people beyond just you. Maybe you want to eradicate hunger or fight homelessness or depression or suicide or do something that has a lot of meaning to it. I don't know the answer to that question. That's a question you have to ask yourself, but I challenge you to ask yourself that question and to start stepping in the direction of that important thing to make your life better, to make the lives of those you love better, and improve the world at large. All right, so that's all I got for this time. I hope you're doing well wherever you are, mentally and physically. And until next time, peace.